Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be talking about some of the new cards coming out in the Naval Warfare expansion that is coming out June 18th, which is 10 days from the day of recording, and essentially these cards are being announced either on the Discord or through different content creators, so expect an announcement or a video here showcasing some of the new cards in the near future, fingers crossed. But what I have here today is 16 of the most recent cards that have been revealed. So this is already part 2. If you want to see part 1, just look back on my channel. And yeah, let's jump into the video and get into the cards. So let's roll the intro.
What a performance there by J-King.
J-King, full plot armor.
J-King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J-King is our world champion! J-King 7! What? The back-to-back Kards world champion!
Alrighty, so our first card here is a French card, a French special, and this is quite important because the minor nations are only getting 3 new cards per expansion, so, not per expansion, from this expansion, so it's 1 special, 1 limited, and 1 standard rarity card, and we've already seen the French one, which was the, a French standard 1 credit order, draw a card, draw the top non-French card from your deck, shuffle your deck. Well, this is a 3 credit 2/2 French infantry, 1 operation cost, blitz, give your units +1/+1 the first time you shuffle your deck each turn. So if you play this, and then you shuffle, it gives this and every other unit on your board +1/+1. And we've already seen a standard 1 credit shuffle, and this is on top of shuffle effects that already exist in the game. And a couple of them are coming back, but like Take Liberty, Edge of the Empire, and we've already seen Shifting Doctrine revealed already, which is the 1 credit Japanese shuffle. So this is very clearly signifying that there's probably going to be a Japan-France shuffle deck. Now, is that going to be a hyper-aggressive deck? Is that going to be like a mid-rangey deck? Is that going to be a control deck? Well, this card definitely suggests it is definitely leaning towards the aggressive end of things, because this is a card that kind of sucks if it's only buffing 1 or 2 units, but if you're buffing like 3, 4, 5 units, this card is incredible. Or if you're playing this out with just so many other things that there's so many threats to remove that they can't necessarily kill this, and you're able to trigger this multiple times, that's going to be quite good as well. And +1/+1 for an AoE buff. I've seen a lot of people saying that this card looks absolutely terrible. I think this card is probably quite good. Now, on its own, this card is bad, and I don't know if Japan is going to have the ability to have huge, consistent boards of like 4+ units. But even if you're like buffing 3 other units with this, or even 2 other units with this, it's fine, because it's a threat that your opponent has to kill. If you're in a situation where the board state's like kind of equal, or you're kind of ahead, and that's going to be most of the time as a aggressive Japanese deck by like turn 4, turn 5. So, you know, it's not terrible in that sense. And obviously, if they can't remove it, it's going to snowball so quickly. So I think it's actually kind of comparable in some ways to Samua, where Samua is obviously a better unit on its own, and it's going to be harder for your opponent to remove, and you don't have to build your deck around it. But this is going to be so much better than Samua if your opponent can't remove it, and it's also able to trigger its effect immediately. Now, I've talked about Japan because Japan has all of the other shuffle stuff, but there is 1 French shuffle card here, and we'll see if there's a couple more shuffles from some of the other nations that you could theoretically pair this with. I think Japan is going to be like the only one that's going to be worth talking about in terms of like a competitive quality deck, unless we see some crazy stuff revealed. But all in all, I think this is going to be a very, very solid card. One of the better cards and key cards of any sort of Japan-France shuffle aggro, and it does seem like that is one of the decks that they want to push this expansion. How far they want to push it, we'll have to see, because every expansion there's a few archetypes that they clearly have in mind, different nation combinations and stuff, and you know, how well those decks end up working out is unclear. Sometimes it's the deck that you expect to works out, like with Throp. Throp eventually got pushed enough that US-France Throp 3 operation deck became viable, and that was obviously the intended combination with the cards that were released, but then the other stuff is sort of the unintended combination. Like, I don't think Germany-France was sort of intended to take over the meta in the way it kind of has when they released the United Front set. So all in all, very good card, but again, don't just like go out and craft this card day one if you have limited resources, because if the shuffle deck doesn't exist, this card's unplayable. This card is exclusively playable in a dedicated archetype around this card, so do not craft this card unless you are absolutely positive that shuffle is good and worth playing, worth crafting, and also not too good that it's going to get nerfed immediately. Then we have another card that has some shuffle synergy and further pushes the Japan main for the France ally shuffle deck, and that is the third Kure SNLF. So it is a 2-credit 3/3 infantry, which just on its own, a 2-credit 3/3 infantry is pretty good. Like, that's kind of like the rate for an infantry. And then it has Blitz, which is pretty good. So 2-credit, 1 operation cost, 3/3 Blitz infantry is already like above rate. And then has the added effect, reduce the operation cost by 1 until end of turn when you shuffle your deck. This is, like, this card looks genuinely incredible, because I feel like the issue that Shuffle is going to have is if the Shuffle cards are all 1 credit, it's going to be like, well, I have to pay 1 credit on this turn to trigger my Shuffle stuff. And that's like a 1 credit tax on every turn that I want to trigger Shuffle things. And you're still trying to compete with the board against, like, you know, non-Shuffle Jagro. So by having a card that sort of gains you tempo, gains you credits back from shuffling, it's a lot better. So if you have like a, like, you know, turn 3 Kure, turn 4, or sorry, turn 2 Kure, turn 3 Kure attack something. So you have 2 Kures on the board, one's a 3/3, one's a 3/1, and then you play the French guy, you play the 88th Regiment, and then you play a 1-credit shuffle, and now you have a 4/4 and a 4/2, which each have 0 op that you can push into the front line or trade off, and then that will then protect your 3/3 guy in the back, and then also you probably like drew a card because of the shuffle. All in all, this seems like a very solid card, and it seems good enough that you could play it with much more limited shuffle synergy. I'm not saying that it will see play. Like, you know, it's not like gonna, you know, smash this into any Jagro deck. It's not that good. If it were a tank, maybe. Well, for a tank, almost certainly. But it's good enough that, like, if you're just running, like, Edge of the Empires or Shifting Doctrines or whatever, like, just a couple things in Jagro, this could see play. And Shifting Doctrine's already a card which, if you remember, it's 1-credit Japanese order, Intel 1, shuffle a random other card in your hand into your deck, draw 2 cards, so you essentially go even on card size, so it's basically 1 credit, draw 1 card. This, I already said that that's maybe good enough to play like 1 or 2 just in regular Jagro, maybe, because if you're empty-handed, it's 1 credit, draw 2. If you're also running Kures, where you're going to get additional synergy on top of that, where it's like 1 credit, draw 2 cards, and reduce the operation cost on a unit, maybe you're looking at running this in Jagro. That does have to compete with the tank build of Jagro, where you're running all of the, it's like the Type 94, the Type 93, the Type 96, I think it is, or is it the Type 92? I don't remember. All the tanks, and then the Blitz Doctrines on like the Panzergrenadiers. Is a infantry-based shuffle deck going to be better than that? Probably not. But, you know, in one expansion from now, when hopefully, fingers crossed, they rotate Blitz Doctrine, maybe that is going to be the way Jagro is built in the future, so I think this card has a lot of potential. Then we get on to a US card, the USS Archerfish, so we're getting another US, like, boat Navy card. So it is a 5-credit limited, destroy a random enemy unit. So this is already very similar to Death from Above, which is 4 credits, destroy a random enemy unit. Then it has repeat if the top card of your deck is a Navy card. So that is 5 credits, destroy 2 random enemy units, which is the high altitude bombing, which is an 8-credit order. So if you don't have a Navy card on top of your deck, it is a Death from Above that you're paying 1 extra credit on. If you do have a Navy card on top of your deck, it's a high altitude bombing you're spending 3 less credits on. So obviously, if you have a Navy card on top of your deck, this card is incredible. Now, how easy is it to get a Navy card on top of your deck? Because it's not going to tell you if you have a Navy card on top of your deck. You're going to need to put one there, or have some knowledge of what is there for you to do this. And one way is just to run a lot of Navy cards. If you're running a lot of Navy cards, then, like, you know, 60% of the time this is going to work. And, you know, maybe that is enough. Like, it is worth spending the 1 extra credit because, like, 50-60% of the time it's going to be saving you 3 credits on a different effect. Maybe that's worth it. I highly doubt it because, again, it's a US card, and it's an expensive US card, and expensive US cards have a very high bar to clear for being playable. Now, what are the ways to put Navy cards on top of your deck? Well, the card that we looked at for US, the Night Patrol, the 2-credit standard order, which is draw 2 cards, put a card in your hand on top of your deck. At the time, I said that that card was probably not very good unless there was specific cards that benefited from putting on top of your deck. Well, this is a situation where this is a specific card, or not this card you don't want to put on top of your deck necessarily, but if you have this card in your hand, you can put a Navy card from your hand onto your deck with Night Patrol, and then you guarantee that it's the top card of your deck as a Navy card, and then you play USS Archerfish. Now, I've seen some questions about the wording. This does not trigger for every Navy card on top of your deck. It checks once. So if the top, 8 cards of your deck are all Navy cards, this does not destroy 9 units. It will destroy 2 units, regardless of how many Navy cards. It just looks at what is the top card of your deck. And yeah, this is, if a Navy card deck for US ends up working out, this is a card you'll probably play in it. Is that going to be good enough? I don't know. Is the Night Patrol USS Archerfish package going to be worth playing outside of a dedicated Navy deck? Are you going to be able to run just enough incidental Navy cards? And is Night Patrol going to just be good enough that you'll run this just because? That's going to be a very interesting question, because even if the entire Navy deck flops, this card seems like it's very, very good, because even if it's not triggering 100% of the time, it's not a terrible card. So we'll have to see, but my expectations are not great for the USS Archerfish. I think it will live and die with the Navy deck. Then we have the Orp General Hauler. So this is a 8-credit Polish limited order. And it is presumably a Navy card, because that looks like a boat. And obviously, the Orp is the Polish boats. And it is Intel 1, convert target unit and adjacent units into routed troops. Now, what is routed troops? They don't have the art for it yet, so I can't show you the image of it, but a routed troop is a 1-credit 1/1 infantry with 1 operation cost. So it's a light infantry, but worse. It is a light infantry with a operation cost, so it is pretty bad. So 8 credits to turn 3 units into light infantry, kind of, is fine. Obviously this is worse than Depths of Winter, but Depths of Winter might be the best card that has ever been printed in this game. With it, that wasn't nerfed, so, being worse than Depths of Winter does not mean that the card is bad. However, the card's probably bad, because 8 credits is just a lot, and at 8 credits you can be doing so many different things. And oftentimes you're, what deck in the meta is going to have 3 big targets all adjacent to each other that you're going to be happy converting all 3 of them into this? It's very easy to just, put 2 units on either side of your HQ, 2 big units on either side of your HQ, and then it's this is an 8-credit Blade of the Samurai, the 6-credit destroy a unit for Japan. If you're only hitting 1 target with this because they play a big thing in the support line next to the HQ with no other units adjacent to it, and you have to target it, this is a 8-credit Blade of the Samurai that leaves your opponent with a unit. Now, there's situations where leaving them with a unit could be good for, triggering Crossfire or just taking up space on their board. They have to spend credits to operate it, to move it, or try to get rid of it to free up that space. But it could also be really, really bad, because it sticks around, and that's going to still enable stuff like Blitzkriegs or, other attack buffs for units on board, or just trading into things. So all in all, this card is pretty bad. The intel on it is essentially meaningless, because, you're not setting up, 13-credit Tar now or Polar. That's not happening. So the intel on it is not very significant, and the effect seems really overcosted. I think that this probably should have been 7 credits, which is very unfortunate, because, as I joked about in my April Fool's video, Poland just doesn't get good cards. It's really sad to see. Poland has a couple good cards, but just Poland continues to see no play, because Poland isn't. It just feels like Polish cards are not pushed in the same way that cards are pushed for the other minor nations. Look at Dagger Strikes. Look at the buff to attack in the colonies. That card is crazy. Look at the look at Dechima compared to Orpali. what are we talking about? The 13th Dragon, Samua. Samua is absolutely insanely broken. Finnish boys and the Shock Blitz infantry for Finland. Like, all of the other nations, all of the other minor nations have cards that, like, you look at it and you're like, okay, this is clearly a minor nation card because of just how much above the average, like, card quality this card is. Like, this card is very clearly in the top, like, 5% of cards, and that's what you kind of want from a minor nation because they are competing with the wealth of cards from the major nations. Poland just doesn't get this. Like, if this was, like, a Japanese card, you still wouldn't play it, but you'd be like, okay, so, like, Japan is just getting another, like, unplayable, limited piece of removal, but, like, whatever, because Japan's getting, like, 30 cards from this expansion, and, like, 10 of them are going to be playable, and Japan's going to have a, like, playable deck or two. Poland, it's like, oh, this is one of your 3 cards, it's absolutely terrible, and it does not fit into an existing archetype because you have no existing archetypes because your existing cards also suck. Feels kind of bad. This card should have been 7 credits at least. This card could have been 6 credits, to be completely honest with you. Maybe 6 credits would be pushing it a little bit, because, like, if you play this on 3 things in the front line, it's, like, essentially, like, it can be, like, almost like a quasi-board clear, but... Then, speaking of quasi-board clears, we have Victory Banners, and this is a card that is very interesting to talk about. It is a lot of fun. It's a Soviet elite, and Soviet elites tend to be one of 2 things. Absolutely, utterly unplayable, or absolutely, completely busted broken. And this actually breaks that trend by being somewhere in the middle, I think. So what does Victory Banners do? Because it's a somewhat confusing effect. So for 7 credits, target a unit. Convert all units on the battlefield belonging to the owner of that target unit, or convert all units on the battlefield belonging to the owner into the target unit. So if you target your unit, you convert all other units than the one targeted on your side of the board into copies of that unit. And if you target an opponent's unit, it turns all of their other units, other than the one you targeted, into copies of the unit that you did target. So what this could mean is if you're playing against, say, like a ramp deck, and they have like a B-17, and they have a Grenadier Guards, and they have like a Pioneer Regiment. I know Pioneer Regiments rotate, but like whatever. Like they have a Grenadier's Guard, a Flying Fortress, and a Pioneer Regiment, and you target the Pioneer Regiment with Victory Banners, and it turns the Grenadier Guards and the B-17 into Pioneer Regiments. So now they have 3 Pioneer Regiments, and their other stuff is gone. That's pretty good. That is almost like a board clear. That is, if your opponent has a bad unit, or like a completely unplayable unit, a 0 attack unit, or like a high operation cost unit that is low in stats, anything like that, Victory Banners can turn it into it, and then it's like a quasi-board clear. And this is where the card gets interesting, and this is, because just that, if it was just targeting an enemy unit, convert all of their other units into the copies of that unit, that card would kind of suck for 7 credits. But it's where it comes in clutch is its flexibility. It's the fact that you can play this on your own unit. So if you're just in a situation where, you're in a control mirror, and you play out like a Chaika and an 845th, and I don't know. Yeah, you just have a Chaika and an 845th on the board. You push both at the front line to block some stuff, and your opponent like passes back the turn. Your opponent like slams down front formation or something, leaves you with 2 units in the front line, and passes back the turn. And then you play a 0 credit 4th Guards, the 9/9. So you play down the 9/9 for free, and then you target with Victory Banners, and then it turns the 2 units in the front line into the 4th Guards. So now you have 3 9/9s, 2 of which are already in the front line, and then they can attack, because when you convert something into a unit, that unit, it's like the unit, it doesn't have summoning sickness. Like, it's just there. So you could theoretically set up some crazy OTKs, or you could like set up some sick burned combos, like with the KV. If either you like can stick a KV, and by KV I mean like KV 1942, so the one that deals damage to the opponent's HQ every time they draw a card. Like you only need to turn like 2 other units into that, and suddenly they're taking 6 damage per card draw, and that's probably going to kill them. Yeah, like this card can just do crazy stuff out of nowhere, and most of the time, like, there's no super playable combos you can set up. Like, you're not going to be like, flooding the board with tokens and then slam down a big thing and then turn all the tokens into the big thing, like wombo combo turns. That's not going to be happening. But is this card good enough to just put into a control deck? Because sometimes it's going to be good enough. Like, sometimes it is just going to give you slightly more value. Sometimes it's going to allow you to, like, burst something. Like, if you have a Machi on the board, and you stick a Machi on the board, you can just, like, play down a 1-cost unit, victory banners on the Machi, the 1-cost unit turns into a second Machi, and then, like, you hit the opponent. And obviously that's worse than just having another Machi in your hand, but, sometimes you don't. So, yeah, victory banners, very, very flexible card. It's possible that it sees play in control, and it's situational. Like, it's the situations where it is good happens enough that it just becomes a staple of control. It's also possible that it's situations where it's good enough doesn't happen enough, and it becomes a card that you see from time to time, but, like, really, it's kind of on the edges. I don't think there's a world where this card is, like, as absolutely unplayable as Monasteer. And I don't think there's a world where this is like the next front formation and takes everything by storm. I think it's going to be somewhere comfortably in the middle of, like, it seems a little high value. Not high value, like, sorry, it seems a little greedy is what I'm trying to say. Where I think there's going to be more situations where this card comes up as a way to generate value for your deck than it's going to come up as a way to effectively clear your opponent's board or, like, drastically reduce the threat of your opponent's board. In that, I just feel like it's probably going to be correct to not play this card in order to play more anti-aggro stuff and build a reasonable control deck, but you're probably going to lose a lot of control mirrors to people who play this card, like, instead of the third copy of the 845th, because they just want slightly more value in their deck. But all in all, very cool card, very interesting card, and I will be excited to see how this card works out. Then we have the 957th Volkshrenadiers, which, sorry for the low res and high picture, but I wanted to get both of these things on the screen, because the Volkshrenadiers is a 2-credit 3/2 infantry, standard rarity, so it's like the off-Chlorong body, and this says deployment, add a production to your hand, and a production is a 0-credit order, gain 1 additional credit this turn. This card is almost certainly going to be the most played card of this expansion by a lot after the expansion drops and moving forward until the day that they nerf this card, because I would not be that surprised if they nerf this card. So, this is a card that you want in an aggro deck, because it's just a cheap guy to play down who can help you flood the board faster. You want this in a mid-range deck, because it can help you either flood faster or get down your big threat a turn earlier. And you absolutely want this in a control deck because it's going to help you get up to your big board clears, or your big guard, or your big card that's going to finish out the game before your opponent can burn you out. You want this in combo decks for sure, because this, I mean, like, it's going to help you get to your combo faster, it's going to help you draw through your deck faster. You basically want this card in every single deck that has ever existed in Cards, and will ever exist in Cards, unless, like, you, for a very specific reason, don't want to run units. Yeah, this card is absolutely nuts. You will be running this as a 4-of in every single German main and every single German allied deck, unless you have a very good reason to not be running 4 of this in a German ally, because you really need the 12 slots on other things, but I struggle to see what 12 cards are all better than 4 copies of this in any deck whatsoever. This card is absolutely bonkers. And Cards has had some really, really, really broken early game credit cheat before. So, I mean, look at Pioneer Company, look at Nakshub. Both of those have had to be nerfed, and even in their nerfed versions, they're still incredibly powerful. Look at Geburg's Pioneer. I have no idea how Geburg's Pioneer never got nerfed, but the 1-credit 1/1 gain additional credit at the start of your turn. That guy, absolutely insane. If you can play that guy down on turn 1 and it doesn't die to Sickle, then you probably just won the game. This is less powerful than all of those. It is still incredibly powerful. Honestly, it's probably better than Geburg's Pioneer on average, but it's less toxic than all of those because you are only gaining 1 additional credit. It is just a coin from Hearthstone. It is a 1 additional credit on a turn of your choosing. It can be on the turn you play it, or you can hold on to that guy for, like, 6-7 turns until you you just find a turn where you need that 1 extra credit. So it's that flexible. You get to choose when that extra credit comes in, and that is so important. Because sometimes you'd like have played turn 1 Geburgs Pioneer, and then you don't have a way to spend 3 credits on turn 2. Or like sometimes you play Backshube and then trade into something, and you have to end up floating a credit just because of the way your curve works out. This guy, you get to hold on to that, pick it when it matters most. Or you can just hold on to it in your hand forever, and now you have a card to test for Ultra with. You have a card to just sit in your hand for discard fodder if your opponent's playing a discard deck. This card is so multifaceted. You want it in every single deck. It is very difficult to understate how absolutely insane this card is. And it's also the type of card that could just never be nerfed. It could be just a staple of the format, like a 35T, a cavalry regiment, where it's just like, yes, this card is broken, but it is broken in a way that is just like defining to Germany as like as archetype. I've seen people compare this to Aufklärung, and they're like, well, I think it's like, this gives you a bit of tempo, but Aufklärung gives you more value. This is so much better than Aufklärung, especially with Stranglehold gone. This card is like, it's not a question. Unless you are a Yank deck and specifically want Aufklärung to trigger develops for Yank, in that case, I'd probably run this with Aufklärung. Like, this card's absolutely nuts. Yeah, it is difficult to understate how good this card is. It is impossible to overrate this card. Whoops. Oh, and we went back to the beginning. So after that, we have another German card, the Jagdpanzer IV, a 3-credit 4/4 tank, 2 operation cost. So it's pretty weak on the body and stats for what it as it's weak on the body for its cost, but its ability makes up for that with the text, when you attack and destroy an enemy unit, convert a random card in the enemy hand into production. This doesn't have to be with the Jagdpanzer. This is when any of your units attack and destroy an enemy unit, convert a random card in their enemy hand into production. And as we saw, production is the coin. So here we are taking production, which I just spent 5 minutes raving about how production is like ludicrously powerful, and now we get into a situation where we're giving it to your opponent in a way that is ludicrously powerful, because you are turning cards in their hand into a coin, into a single credit. And obviously, if you turn a card, if you play this on turn 3 and then on turn 4 you attack into something and give them a coin, and that lets them coin out like a 5-drop on turn 4, and now you can't deal with that 5-drop, and now you lose the game because of that. That could happen. But more likely you are going to be playing this out slightly later into the game, or maybe just play it out, depending on the matchup, you might play it out on turn 3. And 4/4 body, its body isn't excellent for its cost. It's certainly not riding how many awards, but it's the fact that this doesn't have to be the thing that attacks. You can play this and then just spam out a bunch of 0-op blitzers and trade out the enemy board, and every time you trade out, you are converting a card in their hand into a production and getting rid of the value from their hand. So it is similar to discard in that way. Now, it's not discard in a few important ways. One is it leaves them with the, actually, sort of the only thing is it leaves them with the card in their hand. So if you play Jagdpanzer and then you attack into something and you turn a card in their hand from what it is into a production, and then you play U375 to discard them a card, it might just discard the production, and now you've kind of wasted a card. You used 2 effects on the same thing, so you're kind of net down the cards. The other thing about this card is that it can turn productions into productions. So it is possible that your opponent has a 9-card hand, and then you play Jagdpanzer, and then you trade out 5 units, and you trigger this effect 5 times, and you convert 1 card into a production, and then you convert that production into a production 4 additional times, and they still have 8 cards in their hand. So yeah, there's a bit of RNG to this card. I don't think this card is particularly good. Its body is too bad to be played in a mid-range deck or an aggressive deck, and I think there's just better things you can be doing in a discard deck than Jagdpanzer IV. That being said, I don't think it's terrible inclusion into a discard deck, so you're probably going to see a lot of this, because when it comes to discard decks, there's like the correct way to build it in a competitive sense to maximize your win rate, and then there is the way to build it that includes putting in every single card that can do a discard effect, and that is the way that people tend to like to play it on ladder, because it's a lot more fun, because if you're playing a discard deck, oftentimes it's just for that feeling of seeing a card in their hand disappear, or in this case, turn into something else. So you'll probably see a lot of this card. I don't think this card is going to be that great. Like, I could see this card seen play in a competitive deck. I don't think this is going to be, like, the back-breaking, busted card. It is a little concerning that, like, maybe if you get this down on turn 3 in like a Germany-France type deck into a like a mirror match or against Jagro, where you're just going to be trading out so much that you just nuke their hand of any of the higher value cards they can't play out from their hand, and because of that, they don't have enough. They're not able to get enough of a tempo swing from spending the coins that you're giving them. Like, maybe it will just be good enough in those situations that it is playable for those matchups. But all in all, I don't think this card is going to be, like, taking over the meta by storm. I don't think it's going to be a particularly toxic card. Obviously, this card is going to convert your front formation into a production, and you're going to get mad. But, yeah, that's the case with any card that says discard or turn things into other things in your hand. Then we get on to a Soviet Order 2 credits special rarity, and it says, it's called Orders from Above, and it says, target a tank or infantry, give it +1/+1 for each damaged unit, if friendly. Otherwise, deal 3 damage to it. So, this is kind of the expansion of questionably written cards, I feel like. And that is because in cards, every single card fits to 3 lines of text, and I think as the game becomes more and more complex, as you want to do more and more interesting things, I don't think that can be the case anymore. And it's leading to situations where you're just making cards less clear to fit that 3 lines of text. I think this is kind of an egregious example. Give it +1/+1 for each damaged unit if friendly. Then does that mean if the damaged units are friendly? No, it means if the unit you're targeting is friendly. So how does this work? So if you could just think about this as a 2 credit deal 3 damage to a enemy tank or infantry. So it's a kind of power crept from the people, but it can't hit air units, which is like the classic. And it also can't hit artilleries, but that's the classic Soviet issue. So 2 credits deal 3 damage to a tank or infantry. Not a terrible card, to be completely honest. Like, I don't think you're going to be running that in a control deck unless the meta gets super aggressive with lots of tank decks. But the second effect, and this is sort of a theme that we're seeing with a lot of these cards, is they are multifaceted. And that's cool. I really like multifaceted cards because it makes them easier to run in decks. And the multifaceted nature of this thing is it is a bad version of counteroffensive if you target a friendly unit with it. So counteroffensive is a 2 credit Soviet order that is give a target friendly tank or infantry +2/+1 for each damaged unit. End of sentence. Obviously, +2/+1 is a lot better than +1/+1, especially with the way you use counteroffensive is typically in combination with Winter Warfare to one-shot your opponent or to hit them for like 12+ damage and then probably finish them off on the following turn. This is dealing half as much damage as counteroffensive, which is very significant. However, a lot of the times if you ever try to play a counteroffensive deck, is you will just get blown off the board, you can't stick units, so you're losing out on the size of a counteroffensive, and then also your counteroffensive's just sitting in hand, maybe you don't draw Winter Warfare to ever trigger it, or maybe you're just blown off the board and never get the front line, so then you don't really want to play it because it's +2/+1, so it's not going to make a big unit, and then it's just going to get traded out by the stuff in the front line because you can't get out of the front line. Orders from Above in any of those situations could just be the tempo swing you need to just remove something and then get back on board with your other stuff. The issue I have with this is, one, counteroffensive decks are bad, and I don't see that changing at all, unless something drastic happens with what Soviet cards are getting, or what cards Soviets are getting from this expansion. And 2, I think it is weak enough, the only +1/+1 is weak enough that you can't run this as a win condition in a counteroffensive deck, which means you want to be running this and counteroffensive, and then it's like, okay, but that's like, how many orders do you want to run that aren't units, because your deck revolves around there being lots of units on the board. I don't know. I'm not super convinced by this card. I don't think this card is fantastic. If you're playing a counter-offensive deck, you're almost certainly going to play this card. But counter-offensive decks haven't been relevant in 4 years, and I don't see that changing. So, unfortunately, Orders from Above, I don't think it's going to be that good. Then we have another Soviet elite, and again, like I said before, Soviet elites tend to fall into the completely broken or the completely unplayable. This guy is very difficult to rate. So what is he? He is the 220th Rifles. He's a 4-credit, 2/6 infantry, 1 operation cost, ambush, blitz, has +2 attack for each damaged unit on the battlefield, including itself. So, 4-credit, 2/6 ambush, blitz, infantry, bad. Not that good. Like, honestly, maybe rate, but probably a bit below rate, and even so, you're not playing a rate infantry. You're not playing a rate 4-drops infantries. Now, if there's a single damaged unit on the board, this is a 4-credit, 4/6 ambush, blitz, infantry. Now you're definitely above rate. I don't think you've reached a point where you would definitely play the card. Like, if there was just a straight-up 4-credit, 4/6 ambush, blitz, infantry, would you play it? Maybe, maybe not. Like, if it was American, maybe you'd play it in, like, a frontline deck. I don't think you definitively play it at that. If there was 2 damaged units on the board, this is a 4-credit, 6/6 ambush, blitz, infantry. You definitely would play a 4-credit, 6/6 ambush, blitz, infantry. And that's the thing, is if you throw this to the front line, and there's like 1 damaged unit, and this is just like a 4/6, you throw it to the front line, your opponent's going to probably struggle to remove a 4/6 ambush guy, or at the very least it's going to like 2 for 1, and you're going to come out on top. Or maybe even 1 for 1s, but your opponent spends the entire turn doing it, and if you're a control deck, you're pretty happy with, like, your opponent spending the entire turn to deal with something you did, because you're probably going to be a bit more reactive than whatever your opponent's doing. But, if this sticks in the front line, if you can stick this guy in the front line for, like, a turn, and you run Winter Warfares in your deck, this guy's just, it threatens to essentially one-shot your opponent. It's just counter-offensive on a body. And, like, you don't have to run that in a counter-offensive deck. Now, obviously, you could run it in a counter-offensive deck and, like, play counter-offensive on this guy, and then you're doing, like, crazy damage. But, like, if you just run this in Soviet control that runs Winter Warfare for, like, ISU triggers and for dealing with Jagro, and then just sometimes you're just going to win games single-handedly with this guy if you play him in your deck. And obviously, I just spent a lot of time talking about how good this card is potentially. The issue I see with this is you don't have any damaged units on board because you've gotten blown off the board because you've had a slow start against a deck like Germany, France. And then you play this guy as like a 2/6, and then you like trade into something, like you hit like a 35T, and now you have a 4/4 in your support line. But then your opponent hits you in the face for 5. And then you, like, I don't know, you hit into like another 35T. And this is now like a 4/2, but like the ambush doesn't matter because your opponent is, you don't have the front line and your opponent doesn't care about this. The other issue I see with this is, like, if your opponent has, like, 2 units on the board, 1's damaged, and you throw this into the front line as, like, a 4/6, they're just going to hit the damaged unit into this first to trigger the ambush, and then it goes down to a 2/6, and then they're going to hit it with the other thing, and even if it doesn't kill it, you've dealt only 2 damage to the opponent's unit, and then, you know, they might just, like, drop down, like, a 35T to finish this off. I can see a world where this does not impress me much. I can see a world where this is really good, though. Also, this is all talking from the perspective of control, because that is, like, the only Soviet deck that we've had outside of self-damage. And obviously this card would be good in self-damage, but is self-damage good in self-damage? I don't know. You could just, like, run this in a more aggressive Soviet deck. Like, if Soviets get the tools to do more aggressive stuff, which seems to be the thing that maybe we're trying to do, this card could potentially be really good. Also, I want to point out one last thing. This plus victory banners, the other Soviet elite we looked at, if you can, like, get 2 or 3 of these guys in the front line at once with victory banners and then, like, slam down a Winter Warfare, you're doing so much damage. Now, again, that's not like an OTK combo. That's just like a, like, best case scenario type of situation. So all in all, I think this card is good. And it's possible that this card is just a staple. It's entirely possible that this is just going to be a staple that people are like, oh, like, classic Soviet elite is just like crazy rate because there's always damaged units around. I just don't. It's difficult to conceptualize how often this card is going to be great versus good. And Soviet Control is a deck that really only wants to run great stuff. And if this isn't great enough of the time, you might not run it. But maybe it's great enough of the time, like maybe it's like insane enough of the time that you absolutely run this, and it becomes another stable Soviet elite. I don't know. But I'm very happy to be reviewing Soviet elites that I'm unsure as to where they are going to land, rather than Soviet elites that are like, this will never see play, or Soviet elites where it's like, this should be nerfed preemptively. So yeah, that is 220th Rifles, and it also hints that Soviets seem to be like a self-damage, counter-offensive type of theme, so maybe that is going to be enough to give Soviets a playable deck. Then we have the 108th Panzergrenadiers, so it's a 6-credit, 6/6 infantry for Germany, limited rarity, 1 operation cost, deployment, convert target enemy unit with 4 or less into routed troops, which again is the light infantry with an op cost, and then retreat it. This seems really weird to me. Like, I get that, like, if they have something in the front line, like if they have a Sherman in the front line and then you turn it into a light infantry and retreat it, and now it's in the support line and it's taking up space in their support line, and they have to spend credits to operate it and push it up, and it's an infantry. Or like, it's in the support line and you convert it into a routed troops and then it goes into their hand, and now maybe that forces an overdraw. The retreat just is weird to me. Like, it feels like just such a random additional text that isn't going to matter so often. But all in all, this card looks crazy good in draft, very solid at lower rarities. This is an excellent piece of removal. It's, in a lot of ways, it's like big pack. So like pack 40, the 4-credit, 2/2 destroy target unit that costs 2 or less, if it's a tank draw card. It's kind of comparable to that. Obviously, 4 or less is a lot better than 2 or less. The situation, though, is like, what deck are you playing this in? Because it's probably too slow to be played in any sort of aggressive or mid-range deck, just because a 6-credit 6/6 infantry that doesn't have blitz is pretty bad. And it doesn't like buff any of your units. Obviously, like, you could use this to get rid of like a Cromwell or a Matilda and, push a bunch of damage face with the units you already have, but that seems pretty best case scenario. In a control deck, do you really want it? Like, Germany doesn't tend to struggle with removal. They tend to struggle with the early game and card draw and healing. And this does not help any of those things. So I kind of think that this card's never going to see relevant play in Constructed. It's good enough that, like, people are just, like, randomly going to play one of this in, like, Britain-German control or German-Brit control. You'll probably see this from time to time, but I don't think this is going to be, like, a staple of any, like, German control. I just don't think it's that impactful for 6 credits. Then we have the KM Tirpitz. So this is a 4-credit elite order for Germany. Deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ. The enemy cannot deploy units next turn. Oh boy. So 4 credits to deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ. That's basically right. Air Blitz used to be 4 credits, deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ, before they changed it to 3 credits, deal 3 damage to the enemy HQ. And if you compare that to Bismarck, which is 10 credits, deal 7 damage, it's like, okay, this is clearly better than Bismarck. It's pretty on rate for the burn cards, and burn cards are not that good. So what does the rest of it do? The enemy cannot deploy units next turn. This is an incredibly powerful effect that is cost at 3. Germany has, it's rotated, so you can't play with it, but Germany had a card U-48, I think. It was a U-boat, which was just 3 credits. The opponent cannot deploy units next turn. This is 4 credits. The opponent cannot deploy units next turn. Deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ. So you're combining Burn with U-48. And Burn and U-48 are cards that do not really see any serious play. You combine them together for so cheap, though. It's going to see play. So let's first talk about, like, the decks that we see now. So, like, Germany, France. Mid-range, absolutely you would run Tirpitz in that deck, because one, it's a fairly aggressive deck, And also, that deck just has a lot of 0-op units. So, like, on turn 1, you do Dragons and on Frida, and then on turn 2, you do, like, 35T. And then on turn 3, you do, like, you know, second Dragons and then buff the 35T. So you have three 0-op units at the front line. You've hit your opponent for, like, whatever that is, like 10 already. And then on turn 4, your opponent's getting ready to slam down their big guard, and then you just hit Tirpitz, and your opponent can't do anything. Well, they can play orders, but they can't play down their big guard, and then you also dealt 4 damage to their HQ when you killed them. Or there's a situation where, you know, you're burning out your opponent plays a big board clear, and then you do like a Comet, hit them in the face, you play Tirpitz, so you dealt 8 damage, and now your opponent can't play a guard to protect, they can't play some of the unit-based healing. To do that, your opponent is just left with orders, but the orders are not going to answer Comet in hand, and now you've essentially guaranteed out the win. So it's very, very good at guaranteeing out the win. It's very, very good to sort of press your advantage if you have board control. It can be reach to end out the game, where if you just brought your opponent to 4 and you're top decking, you top deck Tirpitz and kill them. So yeah, this just all around very, very good. But if you combine this with the FW that we saw revealed for Germany earlier, and this was the card that was actually their pre-release card that if you buy the pre-order bundle, you can play with it now on ladder. It's a 4-credit 4/5 fighter that says if your opponent didn't play a unit last turn, at the start of your turn, if the opponent didn't play a unit on their turn, deal 4 damage to the HQ. So what that does mean is if you play those together, it's guaranteed 4 damage from the FW. It's guaranteed 4 damage from the Tirpitz because you played it. And if the FW is triggering, it means it's on the board, so it's almost certainly a guaranteed 4 damage from the attack of the plane. So if you play the FW on, like, turn 4, your opponent plays a unit. On turn 5, you play Tirpitz. And then you've dealt 4 damage. Your opponent can't do anything. And then the FW triggers, and you've dealt another 4 damage. And then the FW attacks, and you've dealt another 4 damage. So now you've dealt 12 damage on turn 6. And then you also still have 4 additional credits to do anything else and, like, play out your 35Ts or your Contest Doctrines or whatever. You're able to rack up damage very quickly, or there's technically actually an OTK, if you squint at it. It's not really, but a crazy combo, if it just works out that way. I don't think you'd ever play it to set it up. But on 12 credits with 3 cards, you can do FW, Tirpitz. It goes to the opponent's turn. They've taken 4 damage from Tirpitz. They can't play any units, and if the orders in their hand can't answer the FWs both deal 4 damage, so now that's 12 damage, and then the FWs can both attack. So that's actually 20 damage. You can just essentially kill your opponent over a single turn where they can't play out units. So this can be very punishing for unit-based decks, and most decks right now are unit-based decks. So yeah, the Tirpitz, absolutely busted card. Honestly, wouldn't be that surprised if this gets nerfed down the line. I could see it not being nerfed. I'm definitely not saying it's a guaranteed nerf, but I would not be that surprised to see this card go to 5 credits at some point, just because it is very, very toxic and very, very powerful. Then we have FW-189. It is a 1-credit 1/3 fighter for Germany, 1 operation cost, so it's a gladiator with upside. So it's a limited rarity, and then it says once per turn, add production to your hand when you play a Navy card. So, production, as we went over, is the 0 credit, gain 1 credit. If you're able to trigger this on turn 2, like if you play this on turn 1 and then trigger it on turn 2, this card's insane. Now, obviously, it's insane even if you can't do that, but, like, just think about that, where it just enables so much so early in the game. You can play the productions immediately to, like, trade out or start dealing damage, whatever you're doing, or you can hold on to those and cheat out bigger stuff a turn earlier. This stacks, so if you play down, like, 2 FWs and then a Navy card, you get back 2 productions. Now, how playable our Navy card's going to be, we'll have to see. So there's, like, the U-375 is presumably a Navy card. It is a U-boat. The KM Tirpitz is a Navy card, so again, you can actually, not only do you deny your opponent's ability to play units, you can play Tirpitz and generate additional credits with the FW. And also, fighters, or just air units in Germany, go a long way right now because of how powerful suppression is. if you're running a deck with like 3 or 4 suppressions, suppression is not a Navy card, but even if you don't hit a Navy card, a 1-credit 1/3 fighter is just a decent body. It's going to block bombers, it's going to stick around, it can trade out 2/1 bodies, and if you get any productions off of this, it's insane. And even if you don't, it's just enabling suppression to draw a card. This card is absolutely busted. This is going on my list of cards I think will be nerfed within, like, probably the first balance patch that touches expansion cards. This card's absolutely insane, and unlike the Panzergrenadier, the 2-credit add a production to your hand, this card can't go in every deck. If your deck runs 0 Navy cards and it doesn't run suppression, you're not running FW 189. It is based around the power of your Navy cards. But even if you're running like 6, 7, 8 Navy cards and 3 FW 189s, and the Navy cards are relatively low costed, this card absolutely insane. And the fact that it can snowball, the fact that this can trigger multiple at once, absolutely busted. I think it's going to go to a 1/2. I think it might go to if you control an FW, so you can't trigger it if there's multiple on the board to stop like the hard snowballs. Because like, what if you play turn 1 FW, turn 2 FW FW, and then turn 3 you slam down a Navy card, and then you generate 3 additional credits every single turn. That for the rest of the game, as long as you keep playing Navy cards, absolutely insane. Then we have the 2nd Marine Division, a 4-credit 3/6 infantry, so slightly below rate on body. Shock, so probably slightly above rate or rate body. Then it says, once per turn, deal 3 damage to the enemy HQ when you play a Navy card, and oh boy, it all starts to come together. It's all starting to come together for what Germany's going to be doing. So this is HQ damage. It's burning out the opponent when you play a Navy card. This is giving you credits when you play a Navy card. And this is a Navy card that burns out your opponent. Combine this with like the FW, that's also like another burn card that has synergy with Tirpitz. Yeah, it looks like Germany burn, it might be absolutely busted. And the funny thing is, if Germany burn is a tier 1 deck, is it even going to run Air Blitz? Because Air Blitz is not a Navy card. I don't know. There is so much burn, and with most of the healing in the game leaving, burn is going to go a lot further than it used to. Things are going to start getting crazy for Germany. And this, it's like, you can run FW in France, maybe. I don't know like how many Navy cards you're fitting into that. You definitely play Tirpitz in France. I don't think you play 2nd Marine Division in France. It's going to be just like what ally offers the most Navy cards to help out sort of, this Navy-themed burn deck that looks so powerful. Like, just the power level of these cards. Like, is there a weak German card that we have seen so far? Like, probably the worst thing is the 4/5 fighter that burns out the opponent. Maybe there's like an absolute stinker German card that I can't think of that's been revealed so far, but like, compare this to like, like Soviets are getting counter-offensive stuff. It's like, yay, we get orders from above. Cool. If I stick a bunch of units on the board and my opponent doesn't remove any of them and I hit a multi-card combo, I can deal a bunch of damage in one turn. Meanwhile, Germany's out here like printing the credits for free and killing you from hand on like turn 7. Yeah, I cannot believe Comet once again did not get rotated, and also you're making Germany burn a thing. Absolutely nonsense. Then we get to a British card, the 40 Royal Marine. So it's a 2-credit 2/3 infantry, limited rarity, 1 operation cost, deployment, fight target enemy unit. So just immediately, 2-credit 2/3 deployment, fight target enemy unit. This card, pretty good. Pretty solid anti-aggro card. Destruction. If this unit isn't Navy, put it on top of your deck with a Navy type. So this unit is not a Navy card, because I think Navy cards are only orders, or at least can only start being orders, and then it puts it on top of your deck with a Navy type. So basically what that means is, 1, it's 2 credits, put a Navy card on top of your deck if the thing you fight kills it. So it is on top of your, like, Navy on top of your deck synergy. but it's also like one of the best anti-aggro tools I've ever seen. Because picture this, you're Japan, and you're going second. Turn 1, Britain passes. Classic. Turn 2, you play the 3-2 shock guy. Britain plays out 40th Royal Marines, and they trade 1 for 1. Because it fights it and it dies, and it goes on top of your deck. And then as Japan, you're like, well, I missed that, so, like, I don't know, I'm just going to, like, play out my 35T. I can't attack with it because I lost my infantry, but, like, it's going to stick around. And then the opponent replays Royal Marine, same card, and it kills the 35T, and then also sticks around as a 2-1 body. And you're just getting absolutely farmed. However, this goes on top of your deck, and it doesn't draw you a card. So you are essentially denying yourself a card draw, in a way, if you don't want this card. Now, obviously, if you're going to say, well, you're not denying yourself a card draw, you are drawing a second 40th Royal Marine, which you're very happy about. But if you're in control, like if you're in a control mirror, and you're both top decking, and you hit a 40 Royal Marine, you're not playing it. It is a dead card. You can't play this card, because if you play this card, it means it's going to do next to nothing, and then it also means your next draw is going to do next to nothing. So yeah, this is a very, very powerful anti-aggro tool, which drops off drastically against control. So I think you're going to see people playing this, especially when the expansion drops. I don't think this card is going to be that popular long-term. I believe that you can get this off of Baker Street Irregulars. I think the Marines are a special ops unit, so I think you can get this off of Baker Street Irregulars, so you're probably going to see this come up from time to time. But I don't think people are going to be hard running this in their deck without the Navy stuff. Now, if there's the Navy stuff, then it's a lot better, because you're saying, yes, my next draw is going to suck, my next draw is going to be another somewhat useless 2-drop in a control mirror, but it's putting a Navy card on top of my deck so that my Archer Fish is doing absolutely crazy stuff, and now this is putting a card on top of my deck, so now I'm, like, hitting fatigue less. So, like, this card could be relevant in a Navy-based control world, but again, what is this card doing against the German burn deck? Because, you know, the shock guy has 6 health, the fighter has 5 health. I guess this is a unit to play so that you have played a unit. But, yeah, I'm not that impressed with this card, because I feel like you kind of don't want its destruction effect to trigger in, like, 50% of matches. Then we have the PB2Y Coronado, or Coronado. I don't know. Tell me in the comments how to pronounce this. It is a 3-credit 2/4 bomber with 2 operation costs, so it's like the Petlyakov stat line. Limited rarity. With the passive effect, your fighters have +1 attack. So that on its own, pretty bad. Absolutely pretty bad card. Like, just that passive isn't fantastic, and 2-op, 2/4 body, not anything to write home about. But the first part of this card is absolutely insane. Show when drawn, add a Brewster F2A to the support line. So when you draw Coronado, and it enters your hand, and it, mulliganing does not count. You can't keep this card in your mulligan, you can't get this card back from the mulligan, from mulliganing something away. You can't trigger this in the mulligan. But if you draw this card at any stage of the game after the mulligan, so say you're going second, and on turn 1, you draw Coronado, it summons a Brewster in your support line. And the Brewster is a 1-credit 1/2 fighter that has +1 attack while in the front line. So essentially, you just get a free token for drawing this card. Now, obviously, this card gets shown, so your opponent sees it, so they gain intel on it. And the unit can't attack on the turn you draw it. So, like, if you go second and you draw this on turn 1, you can't then attack with this or push it to the front line as a 2/2. It's just going to be a token, and then on the next turn, on your turn 2, you can use this. And obviously there's synergy because it summons a fighter and it gives fighters +1 attack. But where this gets really crazy is, so, like, some people are just worried about, like, the high roll of, like, turn 1, you draw Coronado, and now you just start the game with an extra 1/2 token. And, you know, that's insane. I'm not, like, that worried about it because, 1, you don't draw a card on turn 1 if you go first. So you can't get it on turn 1 going first, unless you, like, do turn 1 draw a card somehow. And if you go second, then your opponent has like the opportunity to just do like the classic Jago start of like turn 1 cavalry, turn 2 35T, value trade the booster, and now like cool, you got a token for running a Coronado, but you have a Coronado now, and that's absolutely no help against an aggro frontline. So yeah, I think obviously if you draw this on turn 1, it's going to be good. The earlier you draw this, the better it's going to be. But I don't think it's like as insane as like other RNG based turn 1 things. Like it's no Casino Jagro, it's no Beef Wagon, it's no Geberg's Pioneer. It's just a pretty solid card. But where you start to cook with this card is with Night Patrol. So again, when we talk about Night Patrol, I was like, it is only as good as there are reasons to put things on top of your deck. And we saw with putting Navy stuff on top of your deck, works with the Navy things, and obviously works with the Chocolate Boys, which are coming back. This is now a new way to get benefit out of Night Patrol. If you put the Coronado back onto your deck, and then you just draw it again on the following turn, and unlike with the 40 Royal Marine, this is, like, you're still net drawing a card. Night Patrol is 2 credits, draw a card, and then you put Coronado back onto your deck to trigger it again. So it's like 2 credits, draw a card, re-trigger this effect that gives you a 1/2. You know, would you play a 2-credit 1/2 fighter deployment to draw a card? Probably. So yeah, this has a lot of synergy with sort of the US stuff, and this is very interesting. Now, is it better than Germany Burn? I don't know. But it looks definitely has a lot of potential, and there is a card returning with rotation. Let's see if I can remember. Air Escort, which is a 1-credit choose 1. All of your fighters move to the front line, or all of your fighters get +1/+1. That card, if you're going to have a lot of Brewsters around, is going to be very, very powerful. We've already seen the Brewster. I kind of completely forgot about that. This was already revealed. But the air coverage, the 3-credit, summon 2 Brewsters in the front line. It summons it in the front line if possible. We're getting more Brewsters. So we're getting sort of a Germany fighter, or not Germany, a US fighter sort of deck that seems to be getting pushed here. That's going to be quite interesting. I saw people saying that, like, oh, you can run this in Brit Air. Britain Air, so this is like a thing that a lot of people seem to forget a lot of the time, is 90% of the reason Britain Air is powerful is the cards that, like, is CAS. And CAS requires it to be a British air unit. So, like, after CAS, it doesn't really matter. It's just bodies on the board. And obviously, like, if you do turn 1, like, Swordfish, and then also you pull the Brewster for free, and then it makes it easier to do, like, turn 2, 1-drop CAS, and now you're buffing 3 units with a CAS on turn 2, and that's incredible. I'm not saying it's bad with air, but I'm saying that you can't play CAS on the Brewster. And also, like, you know, +1 passive to attack to your fighters. Swordfish is sort of you're leaning more heavily on your bombers typically than your fighters. So, all in all, it's a good card, but I feel like this probably leans more heavily into a unique US build with maybe Japan ally for air superiority, maybe Italy ally for, like, Regia Aeronautica. We'll have to see. But all in all, very interesting stuff for US. And then last but not least, the final card to look at today for this video is the Royal Fusiliers, a 3-credit, 3-operation, 0-8 guard for Britain. So on its stats, absolutely awful. But it has the passive effect, it has the trigger. When you give an order, swap the attack and operation cost of this unit. This card is spicy. This card is so spicy. So obviously, if you just play it out on turn 3, it is a 3 operation cost 0-8 guard that is unplayable and awful. If you play this out on turn 3 with an order, like you play out Royal Fusiliers and you duress an opponent's unit, this is a 3-credit 3-8 guard with 0 op cost. That's busted. That's, like, absolutely insane. Now, we do not live in a world where you are always going to be able to trigger this on turn 3. And also, suppress exists, and if this gets suppressed, it goes back to just being a 0-8 with 3 op, and also it doesn't have guard anymore. So this is absolutely depressing. But this has great synergy with Chain Home, the sort of the naval support card that Britain got, which is give a set of units attack equal to its health, and then it fights a random thing. So, you know, if you play Chain Home on like you play Fusiliers on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you play Chain Home on this, and you just absolutely nuke a unit for 8. And now you have, like, a 0-op unit that can, like, push up, and it's huge in stats. That's really good. The other issue I see with this, with playing it in just like a ramp deck or whatever, like a British control deck, is you don't really want to be that heavily tied to what cards you can and can't play in your hand, because you don't want to reduce this thing's attack back to 0. Because, like, picture this. You play this, Royal Fusiliers on turn 3, and you duress, so it's a 3-8, and your opponent plays a bunch of stuff but doesn't attack into it. And then on your turn, like, you really want to play Double War Machine on your turn 4. You really want to play Double War Machine. But if you play Double War Machine, or no, sorry, Double War Machine, it would just swap back and forth. Sorry, you really want to play War Bonds. You know, it's turn 5, like you have 5 credits, and you really want to play War Bonds. But if you play War Bonds, it reduces this guy's attack back to 0, and then your opponent just kills it for free. And you're losing value on that. So now you have to, like, find a different play, or you just have to risk, essentially, having played Royal Fusiliers for nothing. Now, we play 3 credit, well, we play. People have played Fortification in the past as just 3 credit, heal 7. Even if you play this and your opponent just hits into it 8, like, for 8 damage with units, and their units all survive, that's essentially 3 credits, heal 8, which is better than Fortification. So, absolutely worst case scenario, in terms of, like, you have to leave it on the board as a 0-8, it's not terrible, and especially if it's slowing down your opponent into, like, a wave after wave or a crossfire type of turn. Absolutely not terrible. The big issue is if this just gets suppressed, it is completely and utterly unplayable. So the big actually combo that I've thought about with this card is if you play this with no retreat in Soviets, which is give a unit cannot be retreated, cannot be suppressed, 0 credit order. Those in combination, you have now created an unsuppressible, unretreatable 3-8 guard with 0 op on turn 3. And now, as long as you just play units for the rest of the game, or play orders 2 at a time, you just created, like, the most insane anti-aggro card ever. And you're just crushing any aggro deck. Now, obviously, that requires you to play no retreat in your deck, or no retreat, no surrender. I don't remember. They're both cards. One of them's the 0 cost one. The issue is you have to play that in your deck, and you're not always going to have that 2-card combination on turn 3, but hey, Soviet Control has definitely shown that it is willing to play a 2-card combination to absolutely crush aggro decks, so maybe this is the new Fiat Claim the Skies. It is now Royal Fusiliers No Retreat. Absolutely possible that combo is playable. So, Royal Fusiliers, I'm not expecting this to be just like an auto-include into every single deck, but I think it is good enough that there's a reasonable possibility that this sees play. But again, slamming down a 0-8 guard or a 3-8 guard doesn't really matter a whole lot when your opponent is burning you down from 20 by, like, turn 7 with Germany. And that brings us to the end. So, that's all of the cards. What are the nations all doing? Japan seems to be doing some shuffle stuff, and maybe some intel stuff. France is definitely leaning into shuffle. US is doing fighters. Soviets is doing counteroffensive. Britain is just doing generic control things. And Germany is doing credit printing burn. And let me tell you, out of all of those things, one of them sounds a lot better than the others. So hopefully that is not the case. Hopefully they are holding out some very powerful cards for the other nations for their respective builds. Or hopefully the just meta leads in a way that, like, you know, like a burn deck can't work. Like, the issue I see with that is the only way a burn deck can't work is if the meta is aggressive enough that things go under the burn deck. Because they've removed basically all of the healing. I guess maybe if, like, discard, like, you just discard out all of their burn stuff before they can play it. But, like, if you're in a world where it's, like, the only way burn isn't the top of the meta is if we're either in a hyper-aggressive meta or a discard meta, I don't like the sound of any of that. So I'm a little concerned about the direction of sort of the meta after this expansion drops. But again, we've looked at, like, less than 50% of the cards so far from this expansion, so it's entirely possible that there's going to be, like, some crazy new healing capabilities added in to, like, Britain or Soviets. It's possible that, like, Japan hyper aggro is going to be very, very powerful. It's possible that, you know, there's just, like, some weird anti-burn tech, like more cards like Alpenfestung, where it's not, like, direct healing, but, like, it's heal back to a certain amount to avoid being just burnt down. But yeah, I'm a little wee bit concerned by burn. But yeah, all in all, some very cool cards. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know what you think of these cards. Is there anything you're really looking forward to playing with? Is there things you are dreading playing against? Do you disagree with anything I have said here? Any of that and more in the comments down below, or join my Discord to continue the conversation over there. Subscribe if you haven't already, so that you see part 3 of this video when it comes out in probably the next couple days, once they have revealed enough cards to warrant making a 3rd video. And with all of that being said, thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one.